So those are the picks for the week. And now we go to the starts and sits for fantasy week 15. Very critical. Make sure you keep an eye out before I throw it to John. But keep an eye out for who plays on Saturday and Sunday, especially with all the COVID stuff. Because, for example, I got to keep an eye on Javonte Williams because I think I either got to start him or Antonio Gibson. And also, you mentioned Washington's had a litany of COVID issues. So it's playoff week for me. I'm really scared because all my team's getting killed because I also have Odell in that league. And Odell is out, and I have to play DK, and DK's been in, and now he doesn't have Tyler Lockett. So I'm like, man, like hopefully they somehow force feed him. But anyways, enough about me. Help the people out, John, for Week 15 starts and sits.
Yeah, week 15 starts and sits. Say it every week. Not going to tell you to start Jonathan Taylor, anybody like that of that caliber. Those guys are obvious. This is supposed to be people who are maybe a little bit more questionable. Maybe you're worried about. Maybe it's a spot start. Maybe it's a streaming option due to somebody missing because of COVID or something along those lines. Maybe even some options that if they're available on your waiver wire, you could pick them up because they have a good matchup. And then on the sit side, this is people who really just don't like the matchup. So first up on the starts, I know I said it's not going to be obvious, people, and you might think just because of his name, this feels like an obvious guy, but over the last 5 weeks or so, it has not been. But I think he's going to bounce back this week, and that is Dak Prescott from the Dallas Cowboys. The last couple of games, he has actually not even been a top 20 fantasy quarterback, has not been very good, especially in this past week. The Washington game, it just not a lot going for him in that one. Wasn't able to do much, through the air. Even Jerry Jones has come out and said that he's in a slump, but they play the Giants this week, and the Giants are one of the worst defenses in the entire league, specifically against quarterbacks in fantasy. Over the last 5 games, I think in 4 of them, they've allowed multiple touchdowns through the air in each game. And also, I think on average, they allow over the last 5 weeks 22 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, which is pretty bad. So start Dak Prescott. I think if there's any week to get out of this slump that he's in, which we talked about it in our reaction. So if you want to hear more about what's happening in that slump, go watch that video. But if there's any week for him to get out of it, I would say it's this week against the Giants, where even his owner is calling him out for it. I think he's going to want to shut people up and probably have a little bit more motivation. And it helps too. The last time they played the Giants, they put up 44 points. Mike Glennon's on the other side as the quarterback, so they probably can't move the ball very well. Seems like a perfect recipe for Dak to bounce back. The next start of the week at quarterback is Justin Fields from the Chicago Bears. I don't think the Bears win this game, but I do think that Justin Fields will have success. He's been averaging 18 points a game over his last 3 healthy starts. And that's pretty good for fantasy. Those are top 10 quarterback finishes each of those weeks. And the big reason is because of his ability to run the ball. Also, the Vikings are just not very good defensively against quarterbacks in fantasy. They typically allow over 20 points over the last 2 months or so. And so, if Big Ben can shred them last week, I feel comfortable with Justin Fields and his ability to at least get points running the ball against them and make some plays happen, because plays are going to be available for them, especially if Kirk Cousins and that offense are putting up major points on the other side. They're going to be playing keep up. First off, at running back, James Robinson from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Free James Robinson. They play the Texans. The Texans are one of the worst run defenses in the league. Over their last 4 games, they have allowed, on average, 177 rushing yards to opposing running backs. Obviously, that's multiple running backs, not just one. I expect Carlos Hyde to get involved in this one as well. But James Robinson should have a good game. Would be pretty surprised, honestly, he didn't have like over 80 rushing yards in this one. Moving on, the next running back, Donta Foreman from the Tennessee Titans. They do have a running back by committee. In fact, he's not even the running back who gets the most snap percentage on the Titans, but he does get the most touches. Over the last couple of weeks when they've been splitting carries, him and Dontrell Hilliard, he has had 50 carries to Dontrell Hilliard's 25. And so that just goes to show that he is the guy that is getting the workload when it comes to running the ball. So I expect that to be the same for him this week. I like him in this matchup too, against who are they? They're playing the Steelers. And we just saw what Dalvin Cook did to them last week. I'm not saying he's going to get 200 yards like Dalvin did, but I think he can have a fantasy relevant week in this one. At wide receiver, I like KJ Osborne from the Minnesota Vikings. This one has an asterisk on it, and that is assuming that Adam Thielen does not play. I think that he's on track not to. If that changes, that obviously changes KJ Osborne's outlook on this game pretty drastically. But I like him this week. I feel like he showed last week against the Steelers that he has the big playability, that he can be the deep threat, that he can take some of the heat away from Justin Jefferson, because I know the defense is going to be heavily covering him. And against a Bears defense where Jalen Johnson's kind of all you got, Eddie Jackson's okay, but the rest of the defense, the secondary specifically, you got Artie Burns on the other side. And we talked about him a few weeks ago. Not very good. So I like KJ Osborne in this week if Adam Thielen is not playing. If Adam Thielen is, start Adam Thielen. Moving on to the next wide receiver, Devonte Parker from the Miami Dolphins. They play the Jets, so that's a big reason why this is a good pick. Tua Tagovailoa against the Jets. The last time they played, threw like over 80% completion percentage. So he's going to complete a lot of his passes. He threw over 30 passes the last time they played, so there was volume there. And Jalen Waddle is not playing, so that frees up a lot of targets. Now that could go to Gesicki, that could go to Parker. We don't know who that's going to go to. But Devonte Parker, even the last time they played, had a pretty decent outing. I think he had 5 targets, caught all 5. I can't remember the yardage. So yeah, I would start Devonte Parker in this one. Wouldn't be surprised if he has a big game in the absence of Jalen Waddle. Next, at wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, Christian Kirk. They play the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are terrible. Specifically, their secondary is very bad. Christian Kirk, I think out of all the receivers, probably benefits the most without DeAndre Hopkins there. I think that obviously AJ Green is going to continue doing what he does. Ronald Moore is going to get more involved, but I think that this allows Christian Kirk to be the deep threat guy. We know that Hopkins can often get deep balls as well, but I think this makes Christian Kirk basically the only guy that's really going to be getting those deep threat targets. So I would start Christian Kirk against the Detroit Lions. And finally, the last start of the week is Noah Fant from the Denver Broncos. Denver, they have a pretty easy matchup in fantasy against the Bengals. 4 tight ends. Okay, that's the caveat there. The Bengals are really bad at guarding tight ends. We just saw what George Kittle did last week, where he had a monster game against them. Darren Waller had a great game, there was a list of tight ends. Even T.J. Hawkinson, I think, when he played the Bengals, had a good game. I think he played the Bengals. I might be wrong on that. But anyway, the point stands that Cincinnati is not very good at guarding tight ends. Their linebackers are okay. Their safeties are okay, but they're not good at stopping tight ends in fantasy. And so I would make sure that you are starting Noah Fant if you have him. The one thing that worries me on that one is that Teddy Bridgewater, he spreads the ball out so evenly that at this point, their leading target share receiver is Jerry Jeudy at like 15%. That's not what you want to see at all. That means like Cortland Sutton's getting 14%, Noah Fant's getting 50%. It's very spread out. But I think that with the Bengals' lack of ability to stop tight ends, Noah Fant should have a good week this week, especially since Chidobe Awuzie is having a solid year on the outside. They have Jesse Bates, who's a good safety, so he'll cover stuff deep. I like Noah Fant over the middle in this one against the Bengals linebackers. Moving on to the sits of the week. First up, we got Joe Burrow from the Cincinnati Bengals. I like Burrow, but I don't like him against a Denver defense that I think is going to do their best to not allow the Jamar Chase deep ball. I feel like I'm honestly more confident in Joe Mixon getting going in this one, or everything kind of gets kept underneath, eliminating those splash plays. We know that Patrick Surtain's going to be, covering deep. We know that Justin Simmons is going to be covering deep. Kareem Jackson. I just like the Denver secondary, and I like what Vic Fangio has been doing. And I think they're probably very aware of Jamar Chase and the threat that he poses. I would love to see the Bengals win percentage when Jamar Chase catches like a 50-yard pass in a game. I'm sure that every game that they've won, he's probably done that. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't start Joe Burrow this week. I just really don't like the matchup against Denver in fantasy. In real life, I think he'll be fine, but in fantasy, I don't think he's going to have enough volume to really blow up in this one. Plus, the Broncos, they run the ball a lot, which means less possessions for the Bengals. Next at quarterback, Mack Jones from the New England Patriots. We talked about this, at the beginning of this episode when it came to picking this game. The Colts have a really good run defense. Damien Harris, we're not even sure if he's going to play. He's kind of banged up. So that means that the run game might not be working in this one for the Patriots. It's the Patriots, so I'm not going to, never going to say never, but stylistically, it seems like the Colts are built pretty well to stop the Patriots run attack. And so that means that Mac Jones might have to be relied on a lot more to throw the ball. The one game this year that he threw over 50 passes, I think he threw 2 interceptions. Mac just typically doesn't have to throw the ball that much. And when he does, he's typically not under siege, but in this one, you got DeForest Buckner on the other side who can, wreak havoc for them. Darius Leonard, he's a monster. So I don't know. I just don't like this matchup for Mac Jones. I don't know. I like him as a quarterback, and I think long term he's going to be great. But as a rookie, it's a tough defense. It's a tough game. The other team's going to be running the ball a lot with Jonathan Taylor. So once again, sort of like the Denver thing, when they're on the ball a lot, that means less possessions for you offensively. I just don't like the volume that we're going to get here out of Mac Jones. Moving on to running back. First one is Aaron Jones from the Green Bay Packers. And this is just because A.J. Dillon is getting more touches than him. Aaron Jones is still getting value when it comes to the red zone. He got a couple touchdowns over the last few weeks. But I just don't like the fact that A.J. Dillon is getting more carries, more snaps. I mean, I like that personally because I'm an A.J. Dillon owner in fantasy. But if you're an Aaron Jones owner, you probably don't like that. You wish that Aaron Jones had a much stronger hold on the work in, this game. Also, they play a Baltimore defense that is really missing their corners. And I think that this just really sets up for a game where Aaron Rodgers could be throwing 4 or 5 touchdowns, and maybe Aaron Jones gets one, but I don't know. With the lack of corners, I just could see the wide receivers just taking over in this one, especially Devonte Adams, just having a monster game. So I don't like this just because, once again, A.J. Dillon's heavily involved, and the script could line up to where it's a lot of passing attack down the field.
Also,
Moving on to the
sorry,
next.
real quick.
Go ahead.
I think Aaron Jones missed practice today. I just saw that. I know it was due to illness / his knee that he's been resting because of the MCL issue. So yeah, it's just more things to worry about because I know it's practice, but he missed a day of practice. That's extra plays and such. So yeah, just added reinforcement.
I didn't even know that.
Yes.
Yeah, didn't even know that. So that's definitely a good point. Someone missing practice. I mean, that's a whole day of film, specific plays that they're called that maybe they just give it to A.J. Dillon instead. Next running back, Damien Harris from the New England Patriots. This is assuming he does play. If he does, I think that we're still going to get a healthy workload from Ramondre Stevenson. And I know that I had him on the sits when they played the Bills, and he had a good game, but also he only had 11 carries. He just had like 1 60-yard touchdown. So he finished the game with like 100 yards. But a lot of that production fantasy-wise came on one play. And this week when he's banged up, Ramondre Stevenson's going to get involved. They play a Colts defense that's really good against the run and not amazing against the pass. I don't know. I don't like the matchup here, and I don't like the health concerns with him. So I would bench Damien Harris. At wide receiver, Michael Pittman Jr. from the Indianapolis Colts. I think J.C. Jackson's going to be covering him. And you could argue that J.C. Jackson is having the best season from a corner this year. A lot of interceptions, forcing a lot of turnovers, which is going to make the quarterbacks probably look away from him. And then also when they do throw his way, the passer rating allowed is just absurdly low. So I don't like the potential for Michael Pittman in this one. He's a big playmaker, but J.C. Jackson is as well. And so when you throw up those 50-50 balls, that could result in a turnover. And if Wentz throws one, then maybe he just stops looking that way for the rest of the game. I don't know, but I don't like Michael Pittman this week. Next, a wide receiver, Terry McLaurin from the Washington football team. Had a concussion last week against Dallas, missed half the game. It looks like he's on track to play, but as we talked about in our picks, they're playing the Eagles. Darius Slay has been shadowing wide receivers this year. He's done a great job. He's held a lot of elite receivers to pretty poor totals. He's also a ball hawk. I think he has like 4 interceptions on the year. And it's just the only option that Washington really has on offense. I mean, besides running the ball with Antonio Gibson, just throwing it, who are you going to rely on? Logan Thomas isn't there. Curtis Samuel's always banged up. J.D. McKissick might be back from injury, but they're missing a lot of people with COVID. Kyle Allen might be the starting quarterback. I don't know. I don't like Terry McLaurin this week, even if he does play, just because of all the context surrounding him and the matchup against Darius Slay. And the final wide receiver this week is Julio Jones from the Tennessee Titans. You'd expect that without A.J. Brown, Julio would sort of establish himself more dominantly as the go-to guy. He just really hasn't. I don't even think that on the entire year he has a single fantasy finish inside the top 30 for wide receivers. Um, Julio, just simply put, has just not been very good this year, and also dealing with a lot of injuries, and he's getting old. So I wouldn't rely on Julio this week, especially in a game where they're playing Pittsburgh, who just got gashed by Dalvin Cook. Wouldn't be shocked if they just ran the ball the whole time. And the final sit of the week at tight end, Mr. Kyle Pitts from the Atlanta Falcons. They play the San Francisco 49ers. I don't know the status on Fred Warner. I know he's dealt with some injuries. But even if he's not playing, the Niners are just very good at guarding tight ends, and the Falcons. They're starting to throw the ball more to their wide receivers, specifically Russell Gage. I think it's Tajay Sharp is getting involved. So they're throwing more of their wide receivers. Kyle Pitts' role has sort of decreased over the last month or so, not having as big of a target share. And against the Niners, who are pretty good at guarding tight ends, I don't expect that to change. So I'd sit Kyle Pitts this week. That is the starts and sits of the week. If you got more questions, comment them down below or hit us up on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all the socials where we post about this as well every week.
Yeah, so that'll do it. Everyone enjoy your weekend. If you're starting your fantasy playoffs, good luck, and good luck regardless if you're about to start your fantasy playoffs and this is the week before. So yeah, that'll be all for the week, and we will see you all next week.